This is Hot Mike.
Hot Mike.
On the networks of WDAY. Here's Dom Izzo.
Welcome back, everybody. Hour 2, ready to rock and roll here on this Wednesday morning. Tomorrow on our show, at this time, 24 hours from right now, Zeb Noland will join us, Murray State quarterback coach, former Bison quarterback, who started in the spring of 2021. He was the guy to replace Trey Lance. That is the trivia question of trivia questions for Bison football fans 20 years down the road. Who was the guy after Trey Lance? Zeb Noland. And obviously didn't go how he envisioned. But things turned out okay for Zeb. Went on and started and played quarterback in the SEC, which I think for him being a Georgia kid, if you would have told him that somehow he would do that, absolutely sign him up. Might not have been the route he was thinking, going from Georgia to Ames, Iowa, to Fargo, North Dakota, to Columbia, South Carolina, but that's the way it worked. And then this summer was hired by Jody Wright, who came from South Carolina himself, as he worked for Shane Beamer, to take over the job at Murray State. He hired Zeb to be his quarterback coach. And lo and behold, the guy who's quarterbacking the Razors is another former Bison, and Jaden Johansson from Sioux Falls, who spent the 2019 season up here before he transferred to South Dakota Mines and was a finalist for the Harlan Hill a couple years ago. Had another year of eligibility, wanted to try it in D1, transferred to Murray, and he is their starting quarterback. So some really unique connections there. So we'll visit with Zeb about that coming up on our show tomorrow. Really looking forward to that conversation before the Bison head down to Murray to take on the Racers. And we'll have more on that matchup coming up in about a half hour on our Bison Media Zone show, which we do each and every Wednesday. I wanted to get to our interview that we're going to play here in a minute with Jeff Goodman, who we interviewed down in Sioux Falls at Summit League Media Day. Goodman, of course, longtime college basketball reporter, worked for ESPN for many years, and then created his own website, Field of 68, which if you're a college basketball nut, it's a go-to. They have a nightly show during the season that they stream online through various social media platforms as well. They've even got so big that Goodman's group has now sponsored an event that's going to happen at the Sanford Pentagon on the opening night of the college basketball season. They'll have 3 games at the Pentagon on the Field of 68 showcase. The finale of that is McNeese State and South Dakota State are playing at the Pentagon on November the 4th to wrap up a big day of basketball, all brought together by Goodman and his desire to get back to the city of Sioux Falls. And he was at Summit League Media Day, and we got a chance to visit with him to chat everything about where the portal is at, seeing the best players in the Summit League leave now consistently, what the league can do about that, and the state of the game, where things are at. I mean, all the attention obviously on college football and realignment driving that ship, but you'll hear from Jeff, the amount of money that some guys are getting paid in college basketball is more than what some in college football at the highest levels are getting paid. So here's our conversation with Jeff Goodman. It's becoming a yearly tradition that we get to visit with Jeff Goodman here in Sioux Falls from the Field of 68 as we get set for a new college basketball season. I could almost reiterate all the questions I asked you last year about what's going on with the sport, but getting ready for a new season, optimism is always high. What are you looking forward to the most about the upcoming year?
Trying to learn all the rosters. It's hard.
Me too.
It's hard, man.
Yeah.
You get older and, you don't retain as well, and you got everybody. I mean, listen, it's a different world. We talked about it last year, and to be honest, the last year has been much crazier than any year in college sports. So, NIL went through the roof. Yep. Yeah, you got kids making $2 million right now. $2 million. Like, quarterbacks aren't making – SEC quarterbacks are not making $2 million. So, I think the world is changing. And, again, some of it's for the better, obviously. I don't love the turnover. I don't love the realignment. Yeah. I don't love that all these conference commissioners are looking over their back and worried who's going to poach their teams or who they're poaching. So, again, listen, we got to get used to it to some degree, but I think there's some things that are not for the better as well.
2 years ago on this floor, Grant Nelson was a star, had a 20-20 game in the Summit League tournament, and then we see him last April become a star in the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16 and then the Final Four.
Yeah.
Not that we didn't know, Jeff, there were really good players at this level, but that just cemented that there are gems that people just don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I talked to Bill Self recently, and he said Zeke Mayo's already locked down a starting spot at Kansas.
Yeah.
Going home to Lawrence. And you can't blame some of these kids.
No.
Right? If you're Zeke Mayo, you got a chance to go home, play at Kansas, and make more money.
Yeah.
And I don't think Eric Henderson blames him.
No.
But that doesn't mean that it's not sad in a way that, again, the fans don't have a chance to have that same connection. And Zeke Mayo also, it's one of those things where, when he goes back to South Dakota State, there's going to be a little bit of a different feel towards him. It's not quite the same as, hey, you know what? You were here for 4 years. You started your career here. You developed into a hell of a player, and you finished your career here.
I was visiting with Tim Miles, former Bison coach, now the coach at San Jose State, because he was back because 2 of his great players were inducted into the North Dakota State Athletic Hall of Fame. He says, I'm not sure how many more Halls of Fame we're going to have because of what you just said of guys sticking around for 4 years and playing their entire career at one spot.
Yeah, I mean, again, you loyalty, I don't want to say it's gone out the window because there's still some kids that stick around and understand maybe the long-term repercussions, right? Like what it means if you leave a spot as opposed to sticking around and having those relationships. Because, again, some of these kids, it may not work out as well. You may get a little bit more money now, but ultimately you could average impact more. I was at the A10 Media Day yesterday, and, as a kid that kind of, for St. Joe's, who's put up 17, 18 points a game, Eric Reynolds, and he had a chance to go make twice the money. But he said, listen, I want to get to the NBA. I feel like $100,000 now isn't worth potentially making a whole lot more money and having a chance to play in the NBA. So, these kids, it's hard for them right now because it's a little bit of a whirlwind, and they see other kids from the league going and making it. Yeah. And all they need to do is see one. They may not see the other 8 or 9 that don't do it.
Yeah. I'm interested for your nightly program highlighting a league like this. What do you try to do on a nightly basis, especially in the non-conference when these teams have a chance to play some of the heavy hitters?
I love it. I mean, that's when we try to really spotlight a lot of the mid-majors when they get, those big upset wins. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
There's no better, from a lot of vantage points. I grew up, and I still try to go to as many mid-major games as I can, especially in the preseason. But to me, it's like, okay, you go out, you play a big boy for the program to get $100,000 and end up with a win is really cool, right? Really cool. And then for the players, puts them on the map a little bit, and you go into that big time environment and come out with a big road win. I would just love it, and I know it's not going to happen, but how cool is it when you see some of the high majors go and play on the road? Even if it's a 2-for-1. Even if it's a 2-for-1, I'm fine with that. But, it's good for the sport to do things like that. That's why I love, Nate Oates at Alabama.
Yeah.
Bruce Pearl will do it. They'll play at least one on the road against a mid-major almost every year.
Yeah, Alabama's coming to Grand Forks, North Dakota to face the University of North Dakota.
Yeah.
There are going to be 4,000 people. It's going to be sold out, and it's going to be talked about forever up there for that.
And cool for Nate to do for Grant Nelson.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the things that, I don't know. I mean, again, we got a lot of neutral site games now in college basketball. That's kind of what it's come to in November and December. And there's some great matchups. Like Duke plays Kansas out in Vegas. I'll be there. But, man, that game would be a whole lot better at I mean, Duke and
Cameron
Kansas,
would be amazing.
Those are the two best venues in college basketball. Pick whichever one. I don't care which one it's at. It'd just be so much better than having in Vegas. It'll be a good environment, but it won't be great.
I got 2 last things for you. The Big Ten now with 18. We've all talked about football. How has that changed it as a basketball league in your mind?
Obviously a little more depth. It's just realignment to me is going to take time. It's going to take time. I went to Arizona. They're in the Big 12 now.
Yeah.
We're not seeing Arizona UCLA games anymore. they got to play each other. They will once a year here for the foreseeable future. But I hate how the rivalries have been. And there'll be new ones. I get it. There'll be new ones if there isn't more realignment. You know what I mean? I'm not convinced.
Yep.
I'm not convinced that this is going to be it in 5 or 10 years, that there won't be more movement. So I don't know. I have a hard time with it right now. I will say this, man, the Big 12 this year in basketball, holy crap. I mean, you're talking like 4 of the top probably 8 teams in America are coming from the Big 12.
Lastly, it's been rumored forever. Now Gonzaga's going to the Pac-12. How big a deal is that for that and for – they're not a mid-major, but a school like Butler out there, just St. Thomas in this league is being rumored for maybe the Big East. How big a deal is that?
Huge. I mean, huge. I've talked to Mark Few about this for years, and I think – and he's not that much longer for this game, but I think it makes him even feel better about when he does retire. All right, I got Gonzaga from now the Pac-12 isn't the Pac-12 anymore.
Right.
But it's definitely a step up. The new revamped Pac-12 is going to be much deeper than the WCC was. So I think it's a huge win for the Pac-12, and I think it's a win for Gonzaga because, again, the bottom of the WCC wasn't very good.
Always great to do this. Thanks so much for making time, and enjoy the college basketball season.
I'll see you in November when we come back for the Field of 68.
It's going to be fantastic. Big deal coming to Sioux Falls here next month. Jeff Goodman joining us from the Field of 68. And there's our conversation we had with Jeff. And if you don't follow him, if you're a college basketball nut, do it now. You won't regret it because he's as plugged in as anybody. And the games they're going to have, I mentioned the McNeese SDSU game is the game at 5 that's preceded by St. Louis and Santa Clara. The Bison play Santa Clara the following week out in California. That's a 2 o'clock game. And the first game is the College of Charleston against Southern Illinois. The Bison are playing them as well. That's at 11 a.m. Of course, SIU is coached by former South Dakota State head coach Scott Nagy. So if you're so inclined, and those games are all on their website and I think streamed on YouTube, I believe, as well. What better way? That we've got a game on. The Bison women are playing afternoon game, so it's a great way to get ready for the college basketball season. I'll say this. Basketball has it right where teams will go and play on the road. Now, it happens in the women's game. It doesn't happen in the men's game. Like the UND game at Alabama, which we found out yesterday is now going to be nationally televised on CBS-SN and be in front of a sold-out crowd up at the Betty. Those don't happen. Alabama's not going to play a mid-major on the road. They're coming to their place every time and twice on Sunday. That's why that's going to be so a unique experience here in about 6-7 weeks when the game is happening in Grand Forks. It happens in the women's game all the time. South Dakota State has been the benefactor of that. Heck, the Bison got the Gophers up here a couple years ago to play a game. How awesome was that? Remember that environment that night at the Shack? It was great. It happens all the time. That's the one thing college basketball, specifically the women's game, has right. If football, it doesn't happen. And you heard Jeff elaborate, there's going to be more neutral site games like that Duke-Kansas game. That would be all right in Lawrence or in Durham. It's going to happen in Vegas because they want to get more, obviously, games to go to Las Vegas, and they will. More big-time teams to go there because they have a 20,000-seat arena that they know they can sell out, and they will for that game. We mentioned here with the Bison opening up tonight, and you look at each of the preseason polls. I mean, it's like throwing a dart at a dartboard blindfolded here. The men's preseason poll, we found out when we were down in Sioux Falls a couple weeks ago, Kansas City was voted number 1. The Roos have the most returning players. Jamar Brown, who was a first-team all-league selection last year. South Dakota State was picked 2nd. The Bison were picked 3rd. The Bison actually bring back more players than South Dakota State does, as Eric Henderson was quick to point out to me when we were down there. St. Thomas is 4th. The Tommies, that's where they finished last year. I'm really interested to see Johnny Towers' team this season. They lost a couple of really good guys. They have some youth there that they like. Oral Roberts at 5. They have Isaac McBride back. And, it's ORU. they're not going to be bad 2 years in a row. Oral Roberts was not good last season. I mean, you saw some scores where they were getting beat by 20, by 25. It just shake your head kind of scores out of Oral Roberts a season ago. North Dakota at 6. The Fighting Hawks, you remember, finished 3rd in the league a season ago and then flamed out in the first round of the tournament. They lost B.J. Omont. They bring back, though, Eli King. They bring back Trayson Eaglestaff. You heard on our program a couple weeks ago. Amar Kaluovich is back. They always play hard and always compete well. I don't see them finishing 6th. South Dakota at 7. Eric Peterson's team was just beset by injuries all of last year. Caleb Stewart's back for the Coyotes, who lit the Bison up. Omaha at 8. And Denver is picked last. Denver had Tommy Bruner. They had my guy, Tuco Tynamo. Tynamo transferred. I believe he's at Vandy, I want to say. Bruner graduated. Denver made it all the way, as we know, to the Summit League Championship game. I don't know. Denver and Omaha, and Omaha's got Wyoming. I thought he went to Vandy. Omaha has a couple of Bison transfers, as we know there. Josh Streit went there. Lance Waddles went there. But they lost Frankie Fiddler. I mean, you look at it. Omaha lost Fiddler. Denver lost Bruner. UND lost Omont. The Bison lost Andrew Morgan. The Jacks lost Mayo and Kyle. That's a lot of talent gone. You just don't know. We're really anxious to see what the Bison men bring to the table tonight. I know it's an exhibition, but they've added in players to see what they have on tap tonight. On the women's side, I mean, honestly, folks, South Dakota State, Aaron Johnston has his entire team back and adds Haley Timmer and Callie Tyson, along with an all South Dakota recruiting class to the mix for this year. They didn't lose a game last year. I don't foresee them losing again this year. I just don't. Abby Schulte told me from North Dakota State, they believe they can beat the Jacks this year. I know she's got to say that. It's an uphill battle. The Bison were picked 3rd, by the way. Oral Roberts picked 2nd, and the Golden Eagles bring back a ton of talent. Remember, they lost to the Bison in the Summit League semis a year ago. Coyotes are 4th with new head coach. Carrie Amy is the new head coach of the Coyotes. St. Thomas at 5th. Denver at 6th. Mallory Bernard's going to have her work cut out for her. That might be a tough year for UND at 7. Kansas City and Omaha. The bottom half of the league, I'm going to tell you right now, folks, after South Dakota, it is a top-heavy women's league. There's no doubt. Those top 4 are clearly above the rest. It would take something really surprising for them, somebody other than the top 4 that are there, not to finish. Either catastrophic injuries to the top 4 or something otherworldly for them not to finish 1 through 4 when we get to the end of March. We'll break. Our thanks to Jeff Goodman here. We come back. We'll wrap things up. Of course, we've got our Bison Media Zone show coming up. We'll preview that and get you ready for a busy Sports Wednesday. Hot Mike will wrap right after this.